this, we have been able to achieve favorable response from the Ministry of Finance and indeed the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, to be able to get the financing to do a lot of these projects. Now, you do recall, and I must say that if we were to put this into context, then we start to understand that this government has spent more on agriculture and support for this sector than I have ever seen in all of the late 50-something, early 60 years that I've been around. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I went to Cabinet last year when we recognized that there were increases in the price of grains globally. And this was even before the disruption in supply chains. We recognized that in order for our livestock farmers in Barbados to be able to survive without having to pass on significant increases to the consumer, that we had a responsibility to assist those livestock farmers by putting assistance in place to work as a buffer to help them reduce the cost of feed. And perhaps, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is important to note that this contribution, when we did the first $2 million in support, it was designed specifically to target the cost of feed to the farmers, thus reducing or maintaining the lower price to the consumer. That, Mr. Deputy Speaker, was then repeated for a second time, so they had a total of $4 million in support from this government in order that we can keep prices down, whilst at the same time providing support for the small farmers and the livestock farmers. Why am I saying all of this? I'm saying this because in listening to the call-in program and listening to other commentators, one gets the impression that this was something that the government was doing for a feed company. And that was certainly not the case. It's almost like if you have a thirst, you have to drink some water in order to quench that thirst. But you are basically targeting the problem. So that the problem we were targeting would have been the increase in cost to the consumer, not targeting the feed producer, but ultimately they're the beneficiary because it is them that producing the feed. We then, Mr. Deputy Speaker, looked at how we can get production in Barbados up. And at this time in our existence where climate change has been interfering, humbugging, and making it difficult for the lives of farmers right across Barbados, right through this entire region, as a matter of fact. And we all know about the ashfall, the freak storm, and Hurricane Elsa, all of which would have impacted the sector. But we also even know that they're human beings. The farmers are human beings, and therefore they were impacted by COVID just like any other human being. And therefore they themselves had to either stop, pause, reduce, cut back, do all that was necessary, not only because they personally were impacted by COVID, but all their markets as well would have taken a hit simply because tourism was down. People were unemployed, so couldn't afford to buy more. We at one stage had a glut in the poultry industry where we had to put in support, help them with storage, etc. And therefore, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have had our challenges. And from coming out of those challenges, we now have to go to rapid growth in the sector. And in order for us to do so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the government has invested in reservoirs across Barbados, starting at River in St. Philip, in the constituency of St. Philip North, where we are now completing today a reservoir that gives the farmers at river 6 million gallons of water, added to that which is coming down the stream from the river and going into Bronx Pond. So that an investment of $5.7 million at river to give farmers a fair chance at having a consistency of supply of water, bringing back 132 acres of land that was left idle into production at river, giving us a chance now to transition more people who cannot otherwise find employment onto river to be able to be involved in crop production and livestock production. We are also working on the north of the island, the constituency of the Honourable Member for St. Lucie. We're at Mount Poyer. We're also bringing back land at Mount Poyer that was left fallow for a long period of time because of issues with water. And only Friday we did a tour at Mount Poyer. Pardon? The Honourable Prime Minister knows very well the journey we were on when we went to Mount Poyer and the objectives that were set for us to reach production several times. Yeah. And therefore, at Mount Poyer now, if you go to Mount Poyer, you will see that the entire area now is under cultivation. Farmers are now placed at Mount Poyer. There are some 32 farmers who have been given allocations over there. We took a tour Friday, the Deputy Prime Minister, myself, and a team from the Barbados Water Authority did a tour down there, and we are looking at how we can extract water from wells in Mount Poyer, in addition to doing some bore testing to see what additional water will be available. That, Mr. Deputy Speaker, will be a game changer for the people north of the island in St. Lucie, St. Peter, and other surrounding areas, so then that you would see that the government is providing the support by way of making water available, because you cannot do agriculture without water. And, you know, I've had the honor and privilege to sit for a long period of time with one of Barbados's icons, Dr. Chelston Bradford. And he was the first person that reminded me and told me, Minister, don't take for granted, agriculture is about all biological systems. They're just part of the universe. They rely on life. You can't make them go faster than they can go. They're all biological systems. So you have to plan. And therefore, the work that we are doing by the provision of water so that the plants can actually be water fed, because previously in Barbados, and I suppose most of you would have recognized this, Barbados was green. But what was it green with? It was green with sugarcane. And so sugarcane predominantly depended on rainfall. So most of our agriculture at the time was rain-fed agriculture. We have now seen with climate change that you don't get weather patterns and rainfall just like we did in the past. And therefore, this work by creating these reservoirs and seeking to provide more water through extraction is designed specifically now for us to do more crops for consumption, thus providing this country with a greater opportunity to, first of all, change our diets, eating healthier foods, and that's why we are the Ministry of Food Security, and then nutritional as well security. And that responsibility is not one that I take lightly. And therefore, I believe, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that we are in a good place at this point in time where we are able to provide for the farmers at River and at Mount Poyer and Spring Hall so that they can have access to water. Now, I want to say that if there's one part of the budget that I listened to yesterday that I treat to as a revolution in agriculture, is that change of water rates. Previously, you had what the Prime Minister referred to as an apartheid system, where people were paying as high as $4.66 at the minimum, up to as high as $7.78. This has been addressed now in a manner where water can now be accessed by farmers, commercial farmers, registered farmers, farmers who are coming through the system at a rate of $1.80 compared to $4.66 at the base. So that if you even consider the simple arithmetic of it, where you add the GSC, by dint of that rate coming down, the GSC will fall too. So that you're getting 2 for 1, 2 bites at one cherry, a reduction in rate, and by dint of that reduction, they would pay less in GSC. So that our commercial farmers right across will benefit now from a better rate for water, so that wherever you go, the poultry farmers, livestock farmers, I met with them today, and I must report to this Honourable Chamber that they have already done the math. Some of the livestock farmers told me today that the savings are at a minimum of $500, I got it written down here, to as high in some instances $4,000 on their water bills. You want me to repeat that? As low as $500 to as high as $4,000 in savings, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That is a revolution in this country. Because previously, when I sat through all of those meetings, many days my heart was bleeding, listening to these livestock farmers complaining about the high cost of doing business, and at the same time, not having enough financing available to them to be able to sustain it. We have responded by making sure that every last one of them can address the high cost of water rates. And they are now telling me that they're grateful to this government for having the will. And the consumer equity, thank you, will benefit, Honourable Member for St. James Central. The consumer ultimately will benefit from all of this. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we're not just talking a talk. We also walk in a walk, and that is the reason why I say we are on a path. We are on a journey here to make sure we can transform agriculture to a point where a number of things happen. People are empowered and enfranchised. The consumer gets greater access to locally grown food at a more affordable price. And then, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as if that wasn't enough, we are now going into an arrangement with Guyana. And I heard that there were some naysayers on the calling program today on brass stats, suggesting that this will not be a reality. The Minister of Agriculture from Guyana was on the phone with me up to this morning, and we speak often. And he is coming to Barbados March 18th. What is today's date? Today is the 15th. 3 days from today, he's coming to Barbados for us to go to Lears to look at the site where we are going to establish a food terminal. So that this Lears project that we are doing will now give us a chance, first of all, to bring close to 200 farmers into farming at Lears, 77 acres of land into crop production, and another 23 into blackbelly sheep farming. At Lears, we're also going to be established, as the Prime Minister said yesterday, the kiosks so that the farmers can also do their vending. But there's also an agreement already with a fast food supplier, a fast food producer, where a percentage of the food produced at Lears would also be going to that fast food outlet. And then, Mr. Deputy Speaker, crops coming off the Lears project would also be going to the food terminal, where we can blast freeze, package, clean, and even export to CARICOM, as the plan is to use Barbados as a hub, where you use a, pardon? Where you use a hub and spoke arrangement. And my understanding of hub and spoke, given the fact that this is really where my core knowledge in business was, my understanding of hub and spoke is that you centralize the operation and then you spike out the various places, just like a bicycle wheel, where you got the hub and then all the spokes coming out. So that once you do that, then produce coming from Guyana, Suriname, black belly sheep carcasses, etc., will then come to the food terminal, and we are then able to help CARICOM with the crops and the food that they don't produce, and you have an arrangement where that targeted 25% becomes a hardcore reality. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the feed program is also preparing several Barbadians for entry into business in agriculture. And to date, we have just over 600 Barbadians who were trained and receiving land from the BADMC with all of the inputs. So they're getting the cultivation, they're getting temporary water supply where there's no water on location, and we are setting up temporary satellite locations where we're putting in the drums, the containers to provide water for the farmers. They're getting the inputs, the seedlings, they're getting the safety equipment, and they're also getting the drip lines to run water to the fields. So that feed program in itself as well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is now helping us to empower Barbadians in a way like we never did before. And that is a targeted arrangement set out deliberately to give people training, first of all in agriculture, but then secondly, to be able to give them a chance at earning from their involvement in the training, earning from the provision of land and inputs in agriculture so that they can be transitioned to becoming businessmen and women in this country. And then the CARE program, CARE deliberately, again, the acronym, because this is a government that cares, and we have a leader that cares as well. And the reality of it is that a former prime minister of this same administration would have said during the times we were on the cusp of going into the global economic meltdown, and I remember that very well, where he said Barbadians need to get back to kitchen gardens. And that if we are going to withstand the shock, we have to start feeding ourselves and reduce the cost of importing. And therefore, Mr. Deputy Speaker, CARE is designed specifically to target communities where you have some of the most vulnerable people, but you have people who are within their comfort zone and don't want to venture out, but would like something meaningful to do. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, you know that I visited you, and that is about a good example, as good as an example as you could ever want, when you talk about young people who are finding meaningful things to do in their communities by way of getting involved in production. And in this instance, positive, clean production of food that they can eat. Many times you would have had children who may not even eat vegetables for an entire week. You have children who may not have access to food. But if you have a community gardening program, then invariably that community comes together and they can share food among themselves. Children then get an opportunity. People don't have to engage in crop theft. And right across, you start to see changes, positive changes taking place in communities where young men and women are also involved, making a living with some, but being able to feed themselves. And that is the reason why the project is called Project Care. Our Black Belly Sheep program, we intend to reach our set target of 1 million heads. And that is the reason why we are opening up space in Guyana and in Suriname to be able to rear black belly sheep. Obviously, we're going to have to go to selective breeding in order for us to maintain the gene pool, but at the same time, crossing to be able to give us more meat in the animal, and at the same time use for slaughtering, where we can then ship the carcasses to Barbados for specialty cuts to be created, and for us to also be able to consume lamb. And I say lamb rather than mutton because Barbadians eat lamb. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, these projects are not a pie-in-the-sky arrangement. These are things that are actually either happening or about to happen very shortly. And so therefore, if we were to look at what is happening in agriculture, first of all, I wish to thank the Minister of Finance and Prime Minister of Barbados for her support. Has not always been easy, let me confess, but I am grateful to her. I'm grateful to all of my colleagues for the support they give me in Cabinet as well. I am grateful to the staff at the ministry, and I'm even more grateful to the good people of St. Philip South who have given me this opportunity to serve this country. And therefore, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with those few words, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Let me first, as I rise to support the budgetary statement yesterday evening as delivered by the Honourable Prime Minister, say that I am honored to stand in these hallowed halls, this hallowed chamber. Having visited this place many times and sitting in the gallery, it is now a surreal feeling and experience to be sitting at one of these benches, participating in what I believe is one of the most dynamic, revolutionary, and progressive budgetary statements that I have heard to date. Indeed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am honored to be here, and I stand here on behalf of the people of St. Michael North, and this being my first time speaking in this parliament, the real parliament. I see this as almost like a second maiden speech. So I get a second bite at the cherry, and for that I am eternally grateful. So let me not miss an opportunity to once again thank the good people of St. Michael North for giving me the opportunity to represent their interests in this House of Assembly. And I want to again reaffirm my commitment to them to serve and to represent their interests to the best of my being. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the budget speech that we heard yesterday evening as delivered by the Honourable Member from St. Michael Northeast, Honourable Prime Minister, is one that I believe reflects on our previous and current year's realities, what we had to face, what we had to do to face those challenges, and also to allow us and remind us as the people of Barbados of all that we were able to accomplish despite those several challenges that we encountered over the last 2 years in particular. And I've heard many budget speeches delivered from this place, all of them with their own unique agenda, all of them with their own unique mix and flair. But after listening to the Member of Parliament for St. Michael Northeast, our Honourable Prime Minister, as she delivered yesterday evening's budget speech, I can only say right now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that I am beyond proud, I am beyond pleased to be associated with this progressive, caring, and visionary government as led ably by our Prime Minister and the executive of this country. Therefore, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to congratulate the Prime Minister for delivering this speech, and not only delivering it, but also for taking the people of Barbados into her confidence as we navigate what I believe is the most challenging times that our country has ever faced to date, and with more still up ahead, more challenges, more choppy waters up ahead, and I believe that this is a budget for the times. It is forward-looking, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It was sensible, it was balanced, and it was oriented towards a growth agenda. And I believe that this is the type of budget, the type of statement that the people of Barbados can put their confidence in, and this is a government that the people of Barbados can feel very proud to have leading the charge at such a time as this. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister commenced her speech and her conversation with the people of Barbados by reminding us of the many challenges that we are faced with, especially and particularly in the last 2 years of our existence. She underscored the need for us, sir, as a nation, yes, to chart a bold course forward towards prosperity, but at the same time, she said we need to balance that with the need to protect the most vulnerable and ensure that every citizen of Barbados can go forward and fully appreciate and fully take advantage of the future that is ahead for Barbados. So I say to you, Mr. Speaker, that there are several highlights of this budget that I wish to underscore during my brief presentation this afternoon, and several things in particular to the Ministry of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology that I believe will make the difference in the lives of many Barbadians now and those to come. In supporting the budgetary statement, Mr. Speaker, I wish to highlight and underscore first the context. This budget presentation yesterday evening, Mr. Deputy Speaker, was presented within a context of the worst pandemic to hit the world in the last 100 years. I don't, Mr. Deputy Speaker, have to remind you that this singular event, this pandemic that the world has been grappling with for the last 2 years and has visited upon every single nation on the face of earth, it affected one of our primary and really our main, our critical productive sector of tourism. It is one of our main foreign exchange earners. And because of the pandemic, visitor arrivals and visitor travel all over the globe was significantly reduced. In fact, the Prime Minister would have told us yesterday, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that visitors on the island fell from almost 70,000 in March 2020, and it dropped to almost 1,000 1 year later in April 2020. From March 2020 to April 2021. It resulted in almost, in addition to that, fall off in visitor arrivals. The knock-on effect because of tourism taking such a significant hit resulted in over 32,000 Barbadians finding themselves almost instantly unemployed and in need of assistance from this caring government, the government of Barbados. 32,000 people, Mr. Deputy Speaker, almost instantly found themselves in positions of need. And we, as the government of Barbados, had to find a way to reach out to them, to meet them at their time of need, and to ensure that we were able to keep every Barbadian's head above the water. The COVID pandemic, Mr. Deputy Speaker, caused the government of Barbados to have to find and put in place, mobilize, put at the disposal of the various agencies of government over $390 million that were attaching to the COVID-19 response. $390 million, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That is money that would have normally or naturally have gone towards the fixing of roads. That was money, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that would have naturally gone towards the improvements in our educational system. That is money, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that would have gone towards improvement in our healthcare system and infrastructure. That is money, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that would have gone to improving and expanding the various social services that our government has and has held for many, many decades. But it is money, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that we had to, at the time of need, reallocate towards the COVID-19 pandemic and our response to it to keep Barbadians safe. What else do we have to say relative to the context? The context of this budget presentation, Mr. Deputy Speaker, includes the fact that we would have had the first hurricane to hit our shores in over 50 years. Another unplanned event, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Another unplanned event that damaged thousands of households all across our nation. It was not something, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that when we woke up that year, the beginning of that year, we expected, even though we know that there's a hurricane season that comes every single year here in the tropics, beautiful Barbados. We would not have expected to be hit by this thing called Elsa. And therefore, Mr. Deputy Speaker, yet another unplanned event requiring another draw on the financial resources of our government. That is the context within which this budget was presented yesterday. So when we hear people across the island talking about what more could have been done, we didn't go far enough in certain regards. We could have gone further. We must understand and appreciate the context within which this budget was laid yesterday evening. We must not forget the realities faced by this country, and wherever possible, we must remind ourselves that we have come from a mighty long way. We are not yet where we want to be, but we're heading in the right direction, Mr. Deputy Speaker. What else was the context? The worst ashfall to hit us. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I don't have to remind you, people were shoveling ash off of their roofs. There were roofs that were collapsing because of the weight of ash. And we had to engage almost instantly over 1,500 people, 1,500 citizens, 1,500 sons and daughters of our soil to be mobilized to help us not only with the cleanup of the ash, but the natural beautification efforts as well, and the general cleanup of our island. But sir, not least of all that I have mentioned thus far, let's bring it to our current realities. The budget yesterday, as presented by our Honourable Prime Minister, is also being laid in the context of a Russia-Ukraine conflict that continues to threaten the peace of the world and threaten all of the various supply chain systems and all of the logistics of the world as well. So if it were not bad enough that we had COVID, now at the tail end thereof, hopefully, we're now faced with this conflict, and no one in the world seems to know where it will go. And for a small, open economy like Barbados, a small island developing state that depends so heavily on external support in the form of tourism, external support in the form of multilateral engagements and trade negotiations and trade arrangements and agreements. We rely on our neighbors, we rely on the rest of the world in many cases. We are interdependent, and not just us, but almost every country on earth now is interdependent. And we need to be able to understand the context, therefore, for which this budget would have been laid. It is a rough context. It is a bleak one. But I am very happy today, sir, that we are not like those that are without hope. Indeed, we look forward with great anticipation, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that as a nation, we shall not only survive all that has beset us, but in fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we shall overcome and we shall thrive. But how shall we thrive and how shall we survive, Mr. Deputy Speaker? We shall do so by being nimble and responsive. We have to adjust as we move along. There are many challenges that are already in our way, and there are many that are due to come our path. And we have to, as a government, and we have to help our people to inculcate an attitude of nimbleness, of agility, of responsiveness. Years gone by, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you could expect everything, and you could plan your day, you could plan your week, you could plan your month, and you could be almost exactly precise in the outcomes that you would face. We are now in a very dynamic, Mr. Deputy Speaker, environment, a very dynamic worldscape that almost instantly things are changing, whether it be the price of gas, whether it be conflict in one place or the other, whether it be international geopolitical decisions being made that affect small island developing states like ours. There's so many things that could be said and so many things that could offset a country like ours. But we have to be nimble. We have to be able to be responsive, Mr. Deputy Speaker, so that we can handle those affairs, we can adjust ourselves accordingly, we can put things in place, and where we may have to change direction from time to time, and that is what I believe this budget represents for us. It is a budget that helps us, and it frames in our minds as the people of Barbados, the citizens of Barbados, the need for us to be nimble and to be willing to adjust where necessary. We will also be able to thrive and survive in this current environment, Mr. Deputy Speaker, by rapidly but carefully transitioning our economy and our people into a heavier reliance on digital technologies and tools. The world has changed. The way we did things yesterday is not the way that we can do things today. And it certainly will not be the way that we should do things tomorrow. We have to face the realities of our day, we have to face the realities of our existence, and appreciate the fact that we must change with the world or we'll find ourselves left out of it. And we can do this by working together as a whole. We need to provide ease for those who need it most, and at times, as you would have seen in the budget, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we may need to ask others amongst us who are better off, who are a little better off, who are in a better position to be able to carry a little bit more of the burden, a little bit more of the weight where required and when required. So this balance that we would have heard yesterday, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is seen in a number of areas. One, our government has proposed that we are going to cap VAT on gas and diesel to 47 cents and 37 cents respectively per litre. We have heard the cries of our people, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We are doing our best to see how we can mitigate the affairs and the effects of the rising cost of fuel and gasoline and diesel. And we have put in measures in place wherever possible, and even foregoing the revenue generation to allow some space and to allow some comfort and to allow some ease to the people of Barbados. We're not stopping there, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but we're also seeking to cap freight costs at 2019 levels, pre-COVID-19. We recognize that the cost of goods, when you go to your supermarket, I shouldn't have to say it, but I'm going to say it again. Barbados imports almost everything that we utilize. And I'm so glad that the Honourable Member for St. Philip South who just spoke, has outlined a visionary strategy relative to agriculture. And I believe, and I strongly agree, that agriculture is now taking a seat of prominence in this government and in this country that it has long deserved and has long been neglected to have. So we understand that there are so many things that we need to import, but we have to be able to cap our import duty. We have to be able to cap some of those costs associated with the importation of the goods that we consume in this island and amongst our people. So once we cap those freight costs to 2019 levels, we're actually allowing the businesses that are bringing in goods to be able to reduce their costs, their overall cost of goods, and thereby to be able to pass on those savings to the people of Barbados. How else are we doing this balancing act, Mr. Deputy Speaker? By introducing a fixed water rate of $1.80 per cubic meter for those in agriculture, as you would have just heard the last speaker would have mentioned. Zero rating of VAT, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, on personal care and critical care items. I have heard many a citizen asking for this for a long time. They've been asking for us. We've had even movements that have been started, entire movements have been started in our country, advocating for the removal of VAT on personal care and hygiene items. This government has heard, and this government has responded, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But equally, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I said there's a balance. We've seen the balance on the other side, where we've asked for a pandemic contribution levy of 15% of net income for businesses within certain sectors, the telecoms, the banking, and oil and gas wholesalers. The research has shown, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that these companies operating within these spaces, even throughout the worst of times in the pandemic, were able to survive and to thrive and to do quite well. So at this point in time, as we are coming out of the tail end of the pandemic, and as our government now is trying to move ahead with a robust transformation agenda, we're asking for the balance to be met, where these companies now can, in a one-off payment, contribute to our pandemic response, contribute to offsetting some of the costs, the multi-billions of dollars that would have been put at the disposal of the people of Barbados to address the pandemic and the issues thereof and the fallout therefrom. We're asking for these companies within those specific sectors to make a one-off payment of 15% of their net income as a part of their contribution to the pandemic and the situation resulting therefrom. And similarly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we're asking for our citizens, those earning over $75,000 per annum, to also to commit as a part of their contribution to the response, as part of their contribution to the pandemic and the effects thereof, 1% of their gross income, we're asking for them to put as a contribution to offsetting our government's costs associated with COVID-19. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I move on, I want to now move to the elements of the budget which please me greatly, and some of them in particular for which I have some measure of responsibility. Our government shall endeavor, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to inculcate within our citizens an export ethos, a way of thinking about business that is different from how we have done it over the many years. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we operate within 166 square miles. We tend to think of ourselves as a little island. We tend to think of ourselves as being able to open a small business and sell our services, our products to our next door neighbor and the persons up and down our gap. We tend to think of business only within that context. But indeed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are seeking to shift the way of thinking about business from being one of just local orientation to one that is appreciative of a global context. One, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that appreciates the fact that Barbados is no longer operating just here. You know, we sang a song when I was growing up, we're this little island in the sea, in the Caribbean Sea. But we're not just that little island in the Caribbean Sea anymore, but we're right now a country that is operating and function and trying to survive within a global village, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We're not just here as little Barbados in the middle of the Caribbean Sea, isolated from everyone else. We are right now within a global village, an interconnected web of countries where services and products move from point A to point B almost instantly. Globalization, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is real. The barriers of geography that once kept us from each other, they're no longer there. Because I can go on the internet at any time of the day or night, 24 hours a day, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I can order something that I see on my computer screen, something that I see on my phone screen. I can order it and have it shipped directly to my house within days of seeing it and within days of making the purchase. So we must, as a people, come to the place where we realize that we must appreciate an export focus, an export orientation, so that we can seek to take advantage of this global village that we are members of, we are part of, or else the global village will take advantage of us. And I remember playing drafts as a young boy in Eden Lodge, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I remember they would tell you, I will huff you for not eating. And if we don't do what we're supposed to do, we will be huffed for not eating. So we must, as a people, I implore every citizen of Barbados to appreciate the fact that we are in a global village. We are no longer little Barbados in the Caribbean Sea, but we are now big Barbados transacting business across the globe, and we must appreciate and hold on to a global mindset. Competition is fierce. The other countries out there are not feeling for Barbados. They're not feeling for us. The competition out there for the very limited and scarce resources of this planet is fierce, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So we have to shift from this mindset of having just local businesses to understanding that we must go beyond our 166 square miles, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and find our way in this world, navigate through the vicissitudes of this life to ensure that we have a place and we make our mark in this world. And we can only do that by appreciating and holding on to an export-oriented mindset. Exporting our goods and services, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is one surefire way not only to draw attention, positive attention, to Barbados, where the rest of the world look onto us, and they look onto us and they look to us for guidance in our different initiatives, but it's also one of the ways that we can spur the double-digit growth that our government has committed to doing over the next fiscal year and beyond. It is one surefire way through our export focus, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is one surefire way that we will be able to grow our foreign exchange reserves. And we know all of the various benefits of so doing so. So therefore, as you would have heard in the budgetary statement yesterday, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the BIDC, as we know it, is in the process of rebranding itself. Not just, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in terms of its name, but it is doing so strategically across all of its aspects of its activities and programs. The entire organization is currently going through a strategic overhaul, and it is being rebranded as the new Export Barbados. And this name now signifies the focus of the organization, the focus of its members of its team, the focus of this ministry, and that is to drive exports, drive exports, drive exports, Mr. Deputy Speaker. In addition, the entity shall do that by facilitating businesses locally, of course, not only so that they can grow themselves to the point where their capacity is expanded for local production, but also, and most importantly, and even more importantly, I should say, that they are doing it with the perspective of being able to export their goods and services to other Caribbean nations and even beyond. Through this entity, and with support, Mr. Deputy Speaker, from various stakeholder groups, we shall confront the challenges that are facing industry in Barbados and move them towards an export-oriented thrust. An export-oriented industrial policy is well on the way. It is advanced in its state, and we believe very soon we shall be able to make that available to the people of Barbados.
Honourable Member, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That time flew fast. All right. We're going to be focusing the BIDC now Export Barbados on 3 core pillars. 1, the bioeconomy. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I don't have to remind the people of Barbados about our expertise in the area of bioeconomy. I just have to mention one item, rum. Barbados for many years has dominated the rum space. In fact, I believe that it is said that Barbados is the world leading rum producer. And consumers too, I heard. We consume a lot of rum and we produce a lot of rum. And it's more important that we produce the rum to sell it. Because that's where the foreign exchange earnings come, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So we are accustomed to the bioeconomy. This Barbados government is seeking to expand the bioeconomy, to grow the bioeconomy. And I will say right here as I start to wind up, is that one of the key pillars, one of the key things that we will be doing, and you will see in short order, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is the establishment of a life sciences park. A life sciences park that would allow for research in biodiversity and bioeconomy. You will see a life sciences park that will demonstrate those various elements and aspects of the bioeconomy. And it will attract overseas and outside investment into the affairs and into the bioeconomy elements of the Barbados government. The second pillar, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the Export Barbados BIDC will be focusing on relates to the design economy. Many years ago, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Barbados was known for producing microchips. We used to produce microchips here, and we had a thriving business and an industry that was built upon microchip production and other technological components. Unfortunately, many of those companies would have closed their doors and would have moved back to their relevant places of domicile. But we, Mr. Speaker, want to see an increase in the exports of design, export culture. We want to see that being rebounded, and we are working very diligently with a strategy to see that come to pass. The third pillar, Mr. Deputy Speaker, relates to the ocean economy. And this, of course, as it says in its name, relates to all of those industries that are related to the blue economy, the marine industrial opportunities that exist out there. And we're going to seek to maximize, of course, Mr. Deputy Speaker, on the exclusive economic zone that surrounds our beloved island. So I mentioned, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the International Food Sciences Center, a shared use facility that will contract manufacturing and international standard laboratory for testing services. The Life Sciences Park. We're also, Mr. Deputy Speaker, going to be establishing a green hydrogen park in Greenland and St. Andrew. And this is a green energy park, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that will produce green hydrogen for export purposes. So once again, here lies the potential for our people in Barbados to be able to have a piece of this new industry that's being developed, and that will allow them and allow us to increase our export of something that is in high demand at this point in time. And there are many other initiatives. So as I move towards my conclusion and my wrap up, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is much that can be said relative to science, technology, and innovation. I've already, in our estimates exercise, explained and would have given the people of Barbados insight into the soon coming national ID and digital ID. I want to say right here, right now on the floor of Parliament, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that we are taking every precaution to ensure that when this solution, this tool, is put into the hands of the people of Barbados, that it is done so in the most secure and safe of manners. We are not going to rush the brush and spill the paint, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We are going to take our time and cross all T's and dot every I's to ensure that this tool is useful, it meets the requirements that we have for it and that we have envisioned for it, and also it keeps our citizens safe. And in closing, I want to speak to the My Economy that the Prime Minister would have mentioned in her budgetary speech yesterday. The My Economy, a platform, an initiative, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that allows every Barbadian citizen the opportunity to have a digital account that would allow them access to publishing services, to web publishing services, payment systems that we're going to build out, Mr. Deputy Speaker, so that they can take their own destiny into their hands and, of course, create content and sell that digital content to the rest of the world. There are people in this Barbados, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that are seeking opportunities. I know many people that I interact with in my clinics on a weekly basis when I meet with the people of St. Michael North, who will come to me and invariably they're looking for employment, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But this government is creating opportunities where not only will our people be able to find gainful employment within the industries that we're building out, the companies that we're building out, the sectors that we're going to build out, but we're also allowing them and affording them a chance to chart their own destiny and to create their own spaces, and they can become their own entrepreneurs in the digital realm. Time will not permit me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to speak about the GovTech agency and all that is attached to that. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to thank you for the time that you have afforded me this evening. And I want to say in closing that I fully support the budgetary statement that's presented by the Honourable Prime Minister yesterday. I fully support it, and I continue to lend my support and my voice to this government. I believe that this is an administration that cares and is moving forward swiftly to take the people of Barbados ahead. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm obliged.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 5:25 p.m.
Ready to second that, sir.
Okay, we beg to move that the House will be suspended until 5:25 p.m.
10 minutes? Yes. Yeah, they move up.
All those members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, please say nay. No. I think that the ayes have it. This House stands suspended until 5:25 p.m. Thank you. The sitting has resumed. Honorable member for St. Lucie.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I first of all do welcome this opportunity to speak in this Parliament, what I would consider the real Parliament, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael North said. It is good to be back in the capital of this lovely country, in these hallowed halls. I must also, Mr. Deputy Speaker, commend you thus far in handling the proceedings here in this chamber. I'm sure it must be a very great experience for you. I stand here this evening, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in support of these budgetary measures brought to this Honorable House yesterday by Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Honorable Member for St. Michael Northeast. However, before I proceed further with my contribution, let me pause to express my deep gratitude to the wonderful constituents of St. Lucie for so reposing their confidence in me for a second term. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, in 2018, some 37 years after having elected the first Barbados Labour Party candidate to the House back in 1981, I was given that opportunity to represent their interests in these hallowed chambers. And having done so for 3.5 years, history was written on January the 19th, 2022, when for the very first time a Barbados Labour Party candidate was given a second term to represent this constituency. And I, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, am eternally grateful to the constituents for allowing me to be their voice in these hallowed chambers. I unreservedly commit, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to giving them the proper representation and bringing progress to this constituency. If I may share my views on this budget for the time allotted to me, I would sum it up all in 3 words. 3 words. And I see my friend, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, nodding, because he would have done something similar to this, and you will know when I speak those words. Reasonable. The budget has been reasonable, responsible, and indeed a responsive budget. Reasonable, responsible, and responsive. When it was announced that the budget will take place on the 14th of March, I believe many Barbadians, many of my constituents, perhaps were not sure what to expect. And when you hear about a budget, when you talk about a budget, persons look for increase in taxes and measures that would come to reduce your spending power and things such as that. But in my view, the measures were in the best interest of
Barbados in the best interest of Barbadians, Mr. Deputy Speaker, having gone through the ravages of an ashfall, having gone through a freak storm, having gone through a hurricane, and still dealing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with a monster called COVID-19. And when we look at it, this administration has done reasonably or very well. And to be honest, I'm not sure if there would have been any other administration, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that would have managed all that we would have had to go through in these last 3.5, almost 4 years. We stuck to the task. We knew there were decisions that had to be made, and sometimes tough decisions as well. And we did what we had to do. In our manifesto, of our 2022 manifesto in the last general election, we spoke of the core values of transformation on page 6. We talked about people-centered leadership. We talked about government delivering for all. We talked about pride and industry through active citizenship. We spoke about Beijing ownership being important. And we talked about innovation driving opportunities. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the measures introduced yesterday certainly follow this direction that we have set, or this mandate that we have been given based on our manifesto by the people of Barbados. While preparing to come here today, I engaged a couple of constituents on the phone in trying to determine or to get a response in relation to what the budgetary measures meant and how they saw the budget. And I must say that there has not been any real negative comment in relation to the measures introduced yesterday. As a matter of fact, people are excited, and a couple of queries were raised nonetheless in relation to the renewable energy aspect of the budget. When persons be given the opportunity, as the Prime Minister indicated, that every homeowner have the opportunity to place solar photovoltaic panels on their roof, to be part of the renewable energy process and the renewable energy charge that this country is undertaking. One of my constituents said to me she has a very keen interest in this. And I asked this question on her behalf this evening because I believe that, as she indicated, she will be listening to the entire debate to hear us expand, and I'm sure that the Honourable Member for St. James Central is fully capable of expanding, and he will deliver the goods when it is his turn to make his contribution in this regard. In terms of financing, in terms of what the government in itself would be doing to assist persons an example was given, and I'm not an electrician, I'm not in that field, but an example was given if someone has a house and they're putting panels on the house and they also have a chicken pen that they also want to put panels on as well. They talked about first phase she asked a question, inquired of the Light and Power, what would be the cost in terms of managing that process, and was indicated that a one phase would not help her. She would have to do some three phase adjustment, but that would be kind of costly. And therefore, there are persons out there who would want to be and who are willing to be part of government's renewable energy drive in terms of the placing of photovoltaic panels on their roofs, but they may not have the financing to necessarily do that. I know in our manifesto, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we spoke about working with credit unions and financial institutions and so on to be able to build out this particular aspect on this area of our economy, giving the ordinary homeowner a chance and an opportunity to be part of this. And that is very, very important, because at the end of the day, we as a government and we as a party have always been that party that reaches out to the ordinary person and giving the ordinary person a chance to be part of the development process within Barbados. And here again, we are doing it, and I want to give that constituent the assurance that as she continue to listen to this budget debate, that the response to her, certainly to her queries and her concerns in terms of being part of this whole process, will most definitely, I can count on my good friend, the Honourable Member for St. James Central, to give her that the answers to her queries. Thank you, Honourable Member. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, one of the things that I would want to commend highly in this budgetary debate, and as one of the measures taken, as you move across, and I'm sure as you moved across your constituency, and we all moved across our constituencies, persons were complaining with respect to gas prices, diesel prices. I was a bit concerned myself as gasoline went to $4.15, 13 cents, I think it was, per liter last time. And we know gasoline and is needed, diesel is needed to do a number of things in industrial sector, and it is part of transportation costs, and then obviously it filters down into the actual pricing, because there are times that the merchants would factor in that cost or pass on that cost to the consumer. So a reduction in the tax on the capping of the tax related to gasoline and diesel is a step in the right direction, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and must be commended highly. Must be commended highly, because the government listens, this government listens, this government understands, and this government governs based on what is best for the country at the time, no doubt, but obviously also listening to its citizens and so on. But I want to be sure And one of my concerns is having reduced or having made this adjustment, I can recall as well that the Prime Minister mentioning that there should be publishing of prices over a period of time so that you know where the prices are going. Because if we reduce taxes, which we believe would ultimately lead to a reduction in prices, a reduction in the cost of living, then we have to have those mechanisms in place, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to ensure that the consumer is benefiting from that reduction. We have to put the mechanisms in place to ensure that it is passed on. Because what often happens, and from someone who came out of the private sector, who spent a lot of my life working in the private sector, sometimes you have, when there are measures in place that causes prices to go up, when those measures are reduced to cause the prices to come down, those prices do not change. They may stand where they are for a little while, and at this point in time where we have the war going on, Russia versus Ukraine, and the war going on, and which these are things outside the control of a small country like Barbados, and there are things that would happen with the changing of prices in terms of oil and so on. They were bound to affect us at some point in time. It will be bound to affect us. So I want to know on behalf of the constituents in St. Lucie that there will be mechanisms in place to track and to ensure, for the most part, that whatever savings or reductions that we as a government make to assist the consumer, that the consumer end up being the beneficiary of that measure, and not that it goes to the profit line, the profit of the business place or the business house. That is absolutely important for that monitoring mechanism. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, as I listen to the budget and having been or representing a constituency, Mr. Deputy Speaker, where there are two major agricultural projects going on. Two major agricultural projects going on, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I was very much pleased because I remember at a point in time in 2021 when I visited the Spring Hall land lease project and also the project at Mount Poyer, concerns were raised especially by these two farmers on these two projects with respect to the water. Indeed, as a matter of fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I heard the Honourable Minister of Agriculture, member for St. Philip South, referred to it as recently as last Friday with the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. We had a tour to areas in St. Lucie where we will be, because the biggest problem, first of all, is the supply of water to these projects, Mount Poyer and Spring Hall. And as recently as last Friday, I want to thank the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and her team at Barbados Water Authority and those officials for meeting and coming together in St. Lucie to determine how best we can help those farmers, because the truth is that if you have X amount of land and we want to increase food security and nutritional food security, and agriculture has become a major plank of this administration, and this is something which I must commend the Honourable Prime Minister for, the focus being given to agriculture in under this particular administration. But one of the problems with agriculture on those two projects is the access to water. Access to water. And I was therefore very pleased to have the Honourable Deputy, as I said, and her team from Barbados Water Authority and those other persons involved looking at how access to water can be improved for those farmers out there. I've had conversations with a number of young people in my constituency, and one as recently as a couple of days ago. And they're interested in farming, they're interested in being, as a matter of fact, they're on in the feed program, which is a very, very important and community-based program, a very good program. But the issue is that the water has been the problem. You have crops that need X amount of water to be able to survive or to be able to give you the benefit in terms of your profitability and so on. But that has not been forthcoming. And this youngster said to me, I'm very much interested in agriculture, but if we could get some water at Mount Poyer, that would be great. So we have the government moving in two directions in terms of coming to the assistance of the farmers. First, we are pursuing plans, or we're looking to assist where the access to water is concerned. And in addition to that, the Honourable Prime Minister announced in the budgetary measures, because persons right now use water from the BWA, and they pay some, perhaps what we call exorbitant rates or high water bills, especially when they have to use water for certain plants, for certain crops like tomatoes and things like that. I actually had a conversation, and we had a conversation with a farmer who was with us, who indicated that perhaps she would be happy if the water rates were at least $2, if the rate was $2.64. But we have gone better. The Prime Minister has introduced it and gone even better, bring it down to $1.80. So I know that that farmer is absolutely pleased, because she does not now have to pay, because her water bill will actually be reduced immensely. She was willing, she said she could survive at $2.64 per cubic meter. But we have brought it down. The Honourable Prime Minister in the budgetary measures have brought it down to $1.80. And I certainly am grateful for that on the behalf of farmers and so on in St. Lucie. We also, nonetheless though, I would want to urge the Honourable Minister of Agriculture. We still have the project with the reservoir at Crab Hill, right behind the police station, and I would want to see the Stantec study has been done, and I would want to see that project come into fruition on the behalf, just like the farmers at River have their reservoir being built or almost completed. I would want to see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the reservoir at Crab Hill being completed on the behalf of the farmers on the Spring Hall Land Lease project, so that they too can have proper water access to be able to assist Barbados, assist us in our goals for food security and nutritional food security, Mr. Deputy Speaker. One of the other things that I want to just
Honourable member, you have 5 more minutes. Yes, the time is flying.
Lord. Anyway, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I shall attempt, I certainly will abide by the rulings of the House, but I got to touch a couple of these points here very quickly, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It was indicated in the budget as well, and we know as part of our manifesto pledge to the people of Barbados, that we'll be building 10,000 houses. It may sound very ambitious, perhaps it is, but I believe that we have the capacity to be able to deliver, not just with with some person like the Honourable Member for St. George South, who has a lot of private sector experience, so he knows how to get things done, having worked in the area of in industry much of his life in another place in St. Lucie. I am certain that he has the wherewithal, and he has the know-how, and he has these private sector skills to get this job done. But I want to ask the Honourable Member, I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting to have the groundbreaking at Coconut Hall to be able to let those people know that we are pushing ahead with this, because housing is very much needed in the northernmost constituency. And we have Coconut Hall, we have Colleton, and we have Bright Hall as part of Planning Gains, where we will want to see some housing as well, because this is what is being demanded. Only yesterday, as I went into, I was in a store, a particular place, and one of my constituents approached me on this level in relation to housing. Everybody wants to own a piece of the rock. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I am happy to hear of what the government has put on the table in relation to the provision of the building of these houses and so on. And I look forward, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I look forward to welcoming these projects in the constituency of St. Lucie. There are a couple other things that I want to mention quickly. We were talking about the water, and I want to thank the Honourable Member for St. Michael South East for visiting us with our water issues that we've had from time to time. The Honourable Member happened to be responsible for roads, so I'm not going to talk about roads here. We can have a private conversation in that regard. But I'm glad for the kind of attention that is being given and the support. This government is a government that cares, and it's not just St. Lucie, it's all over Barbados. Now, I listened to the estimates debate, and in the estimates debate, as you know, I would have been in a similar position where you are, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and there wasn't much that I could say, but this is my and give me 2 minutes, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This is my time to just speak now. And I heard one of the officers from the Ministry of Transport Works said they pave in the south first, in Christchurch, I don't remember for St. James North. They pave in the south, they pave in St. Michael, and it's now the time for the north. And I look forward to the constituencies of St. Peter, St. Lucie, and parts of St. James to get their fair share of the cake now, because we've got St. James Central and coming. Honourable Member for St. James Central, St. James, there are 3 constituencies, so all of us form part of the Happy North. And we will work together to ensure, but I know the head of the Honourable Minister of Transport, Works and Water Resources, member for St. Michael South East, and Deputy Prime Minister, I know she is very focused, and she has shown a lot of love to St. Lucie thus far. and I will continue to expect that. We have some issues in terms of employment, and we would want to we believe that these opportunities that come, or with the building boom and everything else that this government is doing, will, Mr. Deputy Speaker, bring employment. I'm sure you too have a lot of young people there. You have a lot of people across the various constituencies across Barbados who are looking for employment. And certainly, I support these measures. I say they're reasonable, Mr. Speaker, they're responsible, they're responsive, and I look forward to the benefits of these measures that are implemented for them to redound to the benefit of the constituents of St. Lucie. I thank you.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. First of all, let me congratulate the Member of Parliament for St. Michael North East, the Honourable Prime Minister, for an excellent budget presentation yesterday. It was yesterday's budget, delivered by today's woman for tomorrow's people. And I want to say, you talk about equilibrium and balance budget, we can go on and on, but we can't satisfy everyone. I want to say that budget was the greatest good for the greatest number, and the greatest number of Barbadians. And when you look at all the measures that were implemented, and the measures that we seek to augment in terms of realizing the dream of the ordinary Barbadian, that which I refer to as the Bajan dream, I want to say, Mr. Speaker, it was out of the stratosphere. But I want, Mr. Speaker, sir, to open my right flag equally, to say to those in the envelopes of Christchurch, those who have sent me to this place on more than one occasion, a heartfelt thanks. I want to say to the people of Christchurch West Central that it is an honor and privilege to be here standing representing their interests and representing their cause. And I know that a lot of persons may not believe it, but we have biblical people in Christchurch West Central, steeped in church and in consecration, man. I want to say, like the good book of Matthew 7, verses 7, I asked in 2018 to repose confidence in me to lead them. And they answered the call. I sought in 2022, and it was given to me. And I'm sure whenever that bell rings again, and I knock on the door, it will be opened by the good constituents of Christchurch West Central to me, to send me to this place again. Mr. Speaker, I was given the mandate to be able to represent not only the green economy and the green environment, but by extension, the maritime and the blue environment. And I know full well that you understand the importance of gammas, because that is what my ministry speaks to. And you know that green and blue is equal to, some people may call it violet, but I refer to it as turquoise. And I want to say, I call it, in an affable way, the turquoise ministry. But because green comes on the color spectrum before blue, I want to start with the green environment, an environment which I happen to lead for the last 3 or so years. And I want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, before we had the vagaries of climate change, before we had the vagaries of COVID-19 as we know it, the existential threat on everyone's lip was climate change. That which disrupted the lives of all, not only small and developing states like Barbados, but all countries around the world. And it's how we respond to those vagaries and those idiosyncrasies that will cause us to survive the test of time. The reality of it, Mr. Speaker, it will save us and save the unborn child. And I want to start by saying, what have we been doing in the ministry that will cause us to resist these challenges. You often hear me talk about the Clean and Green program. And I want to start with that because the importance of a program, which is not only to clean, and I will talk to Barbadians later on in my speech about the entrepreneurial nature and the behaviors that I will not tolerate as a representative of this ministry as it relates to illegal dumping, especially on our gullies and our ecosystems. I am saying, Mr. Speaker, that in order to have a green post-COVID economic recovery, there must be an effort, an unbridled one, with the planting of trees around Barbados. Not only are we going to clean, but we are saying equally, we are going to green this country because the importance of creating those green carbon sinks must never, ever be underestimated as it relates to the ability to sequester that harmful carbon dioxide that seeks to destroy our protection in the atmosphere and our ozone layers. That is as important as waking up one morning and breathing oxygen itself. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, what we started was a journey to plant 1 million trees. We are about 350,000 trees thus far. And every single day, I want to say that Barbadians have become involved in a process that will basically protect their lives. That noble gesture of planting a tree. And as our Minister of Agriculture earlier alluded to, the importance of planting fruit trees, those grapefruit trees, those lemon trees, all the trees that you can think about that is important for our health and soursop. Not only for the trees, but I can talk about biodiversity because their leaves serve as a natural repellent for our mosquitoes. And that is another existential threat that we were faced with, causing the deaths of about 2 million people prior to COVID-19 as we know it. So these things must operate as one synergy. And I'm saying to you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that when we speak about cleaning and greening, I was given the arduous task of creating 30 green sites across Barbados with the Clean and Green program. I want to report to this August chamber that thus far we have created 31 green sites across the length or breadth of Barbados called the Clean and Green program. You cannot have in this country an idyllic song by an iconic group called Beautiful, Beautiful Barbados, and we don't have a beautiful country that represents the whole ethos of greening and the concept of a green economic recovery. It doesn't make sense. So I am saying, Mr. Speaker, in the budget, we are saying to Barbadians, we are going to create. And I put in every single person, all my colleagues on notice, 60 more seats for the new, so 60 more clean and green sites for the new financial year. You can start looking around your constituencies and start identifying 2 sites where you will tell me as minister and my team, because there's a team in the ministry that is responsible for creating these clean and green sites. You'll be able to tell me, Minister, I need this space, which I will create a recreational facility. I will create that green space for commercial activity. I will create that green space for our sporting activities. That green space must bring aesthetics to my constituency. That is the type of conversation I want to hear from my colleagues. And that, too soon is never too soon. But I want to say to you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are talking green economic recovery. We are talking the planting of trees. But to answer the United Nations General Assembly call for a decade of ecosystems resuscitation, we must also acquiesce 30-30-30 vision. 30% of our biodiversity must be realized by the year 2030. And that is a simple notion that we must adjust our brains to. Biodiversity. And I'm talking about the biodiversity unit. A lot of persons in here, the last time I spoke, I asked my minister colleague a question in the well. A lot of Barbadians asked me, what is the Chlorcebus sabia? The green monkey, man. and how we are going to treat to those things as part of our CITES, the Convention of International Trade of Endangered Species. And we are signatory to that species because we recognize as a small island developing state that we cannot do it alone. And the preservation of our biodiversity will preserve our lives and our future. And that is why the importance of it must be repeated in every single household. The reason why the baobab tree, we only have 4 adult species in Barbados. The reason why they're on the verge of extinction is because we kill most of the bat population with our spraying and our pesticides and all the other ways of getting rid of our bat population. But the flower of the tree is a nocturnal flower. The only way it's pollinated is if we have bats around. The importance of biodiversity. I want to say to Barbadians that the baobab tree, found in Asia, found in Africa, those dry climates, is one of the most climate-resistant trees in the world. The most climate-resistant tree. A tree that is able to hold water in its sap, allowing persons to be able to use it for drinking purposes in dry times. We, in Barbados, we recognize that we are about the 10th most water-scarce country in the world. I mean, you heard the Minister of Agriculture speak about water preservation and the way how we can dam water for the farmers and things, the importance of biodiversity and ensuring that these trees not only survive the test of times, but we are able to propagate those. You often hear me talk about the fellow that spoke, the leaf-toed gecko, and the importance of the project we are doing at the BDF to rehabilitate those geckos because they have a voracious appetite for mosquitoes and they have the visual acuity to be able to identify which we cannot do, which the Ministry of Health cannot do, the eggs and the larvae on the trees, the plants and leaves of trees. When we are spraying and fogging across this country, we are killing the adult mosquitoes, but nothing is happening with the eggs on the tree. Biodiversity again. Because if you are not able to kill the eggs when the climatic conditions are perfect, the eggs hatch and cause the perennial problem of mosquito-borne diseases. The importance of biodiversity. And I'm saying that we are not only acquiescing to the request of the United Nations and the General Assembly, it is for every single Barbadian, young and old, to understand the importance of preserving those things natural. I will speak about the biodiversity in the marine environment when I get to that. But I'm speaking of the green economy and the importance of having a green economic recovery so that Barbados can survive the test of time. I want to go on further. I want to say to you, I traveled in December to about 7 or 8 different Caribbean countries, looking at botanical gardens. I want to thank the Member of Parliament, the Honourable Prime Minister, for her efforts in ensuring that we have a natural oasis, a perfect place of recreation, a lounge area, an area where people can balance their humors. We hear now about a retirement home, a geriatric home for the elderly, and that excites every chamber in my body. You know how you have a soft spot for those who are in the twilight of their years? No secret in Barbados, man.
I can't imagine.
And I want to say to you, the importance of having this space where Barbadians can enjoy and talk and PTA too. So for the young ones in the dawn and exciting areas of their life, they can extend themselves in the botanical garden as well and have what they know as their own entertainment. I am saying to Barbadians, we are not only going to plant a variety of gardens in the botanical area, 242 acres or so, and then we're going to develop the international garden on the other side, where countries from around the world can have a realistic stake in building out that international space. We are not only going to do that, but what we said is that there must be an appreciation for science to help build out this botanical garden. I want to publicly thank our lone dendrologist, Mr. Nigel Jones. Sometimes I call him a xylologist because he understands about cohesion and adhesion of water up a plant or the root and stems of the tree. I want to thank Mr. Jones today for leading the charge and being able to bring the botanical garden to the beautiful space that it is today. Nigel Jones and the team at the Botanical Garden, I want to thank you from the House of Parliament today. You have done an excellent job. And we have to start cherishing. We have to start cherishing that which is beholden to us and that which we have allowed to develop in this country. He is the only dendrologist in the Western Hemisphere. And we must not take this science lightly. We must understand that this science is the science that will be responsible for ensuring that we have the forestry, we have the trees, and we have the species in terms of the flora to survive the test of times. Without this green economic recovery, we cannot be talking about all of those things that we imagine to do in the next century or so. And that is why my conversation, I must bring it directly to the importance of the botanical garden. So we said that the science must be an important aspect of the botanical garden. And here it is that we are now on the cusp of building out a herbarium, which deals with the dry leaves and the science of those, a taxonomy center, which speaks to the classification of trees, and a germplasm looking at different stock genetic material to ensure that these trees can survive the test of time. There is no other botanical garden in the hemisphere, as I know it, that has a taxonomy center, that has a herbarium, and equally a germplasm to do that. And that is the importance of having someone like Nigel Jones, the dendrologist, to be able to augment these things. I want to also speak, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, about the highway beautification project. And I want to lend my voice to all those persons in Barbados who, on a daily basis, pay homage to those workers. Clean again and green. They're not only cleaning the highways, there are 7 highways. Now the song called 7 Steps to Heaven too. It's 7 Steps to Highway Heaven in Barbados. There are 7 highways, and we are going to clean and beautify every single one under this project. And those naysayers and fearmongers, and those who may want to critique those youngsters for working hard to be on the front line of not only beautifying this country, but ensuring that we are able to remove the indigenous flora, we remove all the garbage from the drains, and allow the planting of a hedgerow that protects us from the soil erosion as we know it. I want to say to those youngsters, they are at the forefront of climate change, just like every single person in this land. And I want to say to those who feel that they should not be getting X amount and Y amount because they don't see the importance of these youngsters. I say today that it is like folly jumping up and down on stilts in Barbados, man. When you hear the person start the foolishness about those youngsters should never be engaged and have a tangible state. Further than engaging them, what we are doing is allowing them to be entrepreneurs through the Member of Parliament for St. James Central by allowing them to form cooperatives and businesses in Barbados to be able to cater to any contract that government has in its existence in terms of beautifying this country, in terms of building up Barbados. That is what I'm saying. And I will defend it with every sinew of my being. Service is my medicine. Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to say to the 720 that are around the constituencies beautifying and working hard to help build up this country, they are at the front line of our fight for climate change. To those in the botanical garden working, I want to pay homage on you today for doing an excellent job using your sweat expenditure to ensure that we have a natural oasis where persons not only in Barbados can enjoy, but the rest of the world as well. These are important things that will speak to who we are as a people. And it must never be underestimated the importance of these young men and women, because I believe in equal stake. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am saying in the Natural Heritage Department, we are signatory to the Ramsar Convention, a convention which speaks to all the wetlands and how we are able to protect those wetlands, whether there's the one in Long Pond, those in the Green Hall Natural Sanctuary and the Green Hall surrounding areas, and another wetland in the Chancery Lane area. We are going to protect these wetlands because we understand the importance of having these natural wetlands, not only as a fish stock, but as an important part of our biodiversity and ecosystems where bird feeding and such is concerned. I want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the Environmental Protection Department in my ministry plays an important role in ensuring that the air that we breathe is of the right quality. You heard that there was an issue, even in this August chamber that I stand, in terms of building-related illnesses and the standards that we're supposed to exist in. All of this and this testing, all these testings are done by the Environmental Protection Department. When we had the ashfall, the persons on the front line of those tests were the officers of the Environmental Protection Department, ensuring that the ambient air quality that we breathe, that quality does not go beyond what is recognized as international standard. When you look at aggregate matter, particular matter as it relates to a particular environment, those are the things the Environmental Department look after. When there's the issue about parts with the persistent organic pollutants and all those things, the Environmental Protection Department, what happened in our water supply to ensure that what we drink. And I want to be able to say that the Environmental Protection Department's role in ensuring that we have good quality potable water must be emphasized and emphasized now. Because unlike certain countries, I want Barbados to understand the privilege of turning on a tap and being able to drink water from it. How much countries in the world has this ability? How much citizens around the world has this ability to turn on a tap and know full well, they have the quiet, calm assurance that what you get from that tap is of good standard and quality that you can consume? And that's what the Environmental Protection Agency does. They're responsible for ensuring that the ecological system, that what goes into the environment does not pollute the system, and that there is no damage to the underground supply, whether it's water or whether it's the soil that is responsible for growing the plants or what's not. Environmental Protection Department, that is their role. And then there is the Planning and Implementing and Policy Unit, which deals with all the multilateralism and stuff. So that is the Environmental Department and the Ministry from the green side. It is the blue, because they want to get through all of this in 30 minutes. And in order for you to do that, I have to have the Usain Bolt moment. But Mr. Speaker, sir, in the blue economy, and I want to say to the Member of Parliament for St. Michael South, he was not having the blues because he was able to see everything in red and ensure that everything was realized in the blue economy. I want to thank the blue boy, my colleague from St. Michael South, for doing an excellent job to ensure that we have the phytosanitary standards, that tuna at some stage will be able to be exported in Barbados, because Barbados has now reached the standard, the international standard, in terms of being able to export fish at the international market. I want to pay homage to the Member of Parliament of St. Michael South for working hard to ensure that this happened. I also want to thank him for the pristine environment that we see in the markets. That is the work started by the Honourable Member for St. Michael South. When you go to the markets, you see this pristine environment. It makes you feel like buying fish, man. I'm saying to you that I don't only want to look at the highfalutin things in the sea and the maritime space. I don't only want to look at the polymetallic nodules at the bottom of the ocean that may bring value that which other countries may be looking at. And I don't only want to be looking at those rare minerals that may be under the scope of other international countries. I want to be able to look at the maritime environment, delivering to ordinary lives the ability for them to be sustained, and the fishing community to be able to improve their livelihoods and have a tangible stake in the whole fishing industry. I want to be able to bring it down to the basic levels so those who are in the industry can benefit from aquaculture, that which the Honourable Member for St. Michael South started. And he thought about mariculture too, because they're talking about the marine environment. And some people may call it pisciculture. It is not vernacular, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. Pisciculture And I see people laughing, and here is not what the guys do at the back of the Treasury building. Has nothing to do with that. It's PISCI, pisciculture. And it's responsible for ensuring that that fish is responsible for the fish becoming a food commodity. That is what it does. To be able to market that fish, to allow the fishermen, and that's what you have here called the fish aggregating devices started by my good friend here. And those devices ensure that the fish aggregate and the fishermen will have a better catch and a better stock. All those things were done in the maritime environment because, as I said, it is how it affects the ordinary man at the end of the day. The former minister started a boat building program, teaching youngsters in fishing communities across this country the art of boat building. It is an indigenous art and appropriately taught by the old fishermen. We must never underestimate the importance of transitioning and passing down that value information as part of a value chain. And that is what we are doing with the boat building.
Honourable member, you have 5 more minutes.
I tell you, Mrs. Deputy Speaker, I understand the Usain Bolt moment, and I understand the custom Samantha one too. So I will try to speed up. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the fish aggregating devices, as it was on to, and the fishermen having a tangible state must never, ever be underestimated. We are going to ensure that we rehabilitate that coral because we have started a program with the coral nursery to ensure that coral and our reef stock, that those two things are improved so that we will have the aggregation of fish and the species needed to create that maritime environment. We are not only talking about the green carbon sink, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are talking about the blue carbon sink where we are augmenting the marine flora to ensure that it serves its purpose as being able to extract that harmful carbon of the atmosphere. Right now, as we speak, about 25% of the carbon is extracted from the green or the environment or the forestry. The other 25% is extracted by the maritime environment. So we are trying our best to be able to augment that which is in our maritime space so that we can have that blue carbon sink working for the benefit of Barbados. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, you heard us spoke about the definition swap and to have a maritime spatial plan, a plan that sees everything and is able to demarcate areas of the sea to ensure that that area which is responsible for augmenting the fish, that area is demarcated. The area that is responsible for oil exploration, that is demarcated. The area that you can put the wind and to allow the wind turbine to generate renewable energy, that area is demarcated. We are doing everything in our power to ensure that we get full value from the ocean. We are saying as well, and I want to thank the government of Japan for their generous contribution of $2 million to ensure, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that we have the equipment to deal with harvesting the seaweed from our ocean, a perennial rich to our people. And we are saying that we thank them, but not only that, we are going to go a step further. There must be a seaweed recycling project in this country. And I am saying today that the Minister of Agriculture, the Member of Parliament for St. Philip South, has a problem as it relates to food and the feedstock for the agriculture industry. We have the solution with the seaweed. And trust me, with the experience and the training and the scientific knowledge from countries like Argentina, we can get the green seaweed, that brown seaweed and the rice seaweed to be able to give to our ruminants, the black-bellied sheep, the cows, and what's not, so that we can reduce our methane because we recognize that methane is also a serious problem as it relates to the damage to our ozone layer and the stratosphere. These are the things that we are talking about. So when you look at this country, we have to talk about it in a circular way. We have to look at the linkages between ministries, how we help to augment each other's cause. And that is what this government is single focused on, to ensure that Barbadians have a tangible stake in every single thing that happens in this country. And that is what the budget yesterday delivered. It's not only talking the talk as my good friend here alluded to, Member of Parliament for the South, now walking the walk, it is doing the do for the good people of this country. I want to say In closing, because there is so much to talk, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will end up with a lot of frying here. I want to say to you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want the people of Christchurch Bisexual to hear. In closing, I try, this government tries. We persevere. We try and we do good things every day. We have left the word "I can't" out of our vocab because I can't gets nothing done for the good people of Barbados. Then I am sure we will say that we as a government will try and leave the word "I can't" alone. We will have a divorce with the word "I can't." Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm obliged. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 7:35 p.m.
Beg to second that, ma'am.
I beg to move that this House suspend until 7:35 p.m. All those members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. This House now stands suspend until 7:35 p.m.